Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and today we're talking about the X-Men, the Justice League, the New Mutants, Superman, and just all sorts of stuff. But before we get into all that, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and leave us a comment. That helps us out with the YouTube algorithm, but also we love hearing from you guys. We've got an awesome community here, and it's all thanks to you. So thank you so much for being here. So, all that said, let's dive in. Prologue to today's story is a recap of a few relevant previous adventures. Last fall, a group of new mutants enrolled at the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. One was Airhead, one was Axel, one was Bubble Girl, one was Nemesis, and their teacher was the Gold Lantern, who'd been a member of the Generation X team during the 1990s. And right off the bat with this campaign, things went wrong. The Brood became an issue in space, and the Shi'ar contacted the X-Men. So the actual X-Men were off-world most of the time dealing with that. So Gold Lantern was left as the only authority figure at the mansion for the 2024 to 2025 school year. And during that time, a villain with the grafting power had abducted various students and used them for spare parts. Poster Boy in Adventure Number One almost died in the danger room. Axel kept losing his temper, killing people, burning stuff down, including a local zoo. And the whole year was just a chaotic mess. And an anthropomorphic rabbit was even killed on school grounds. When the X-Men got back from space, Doctor Doom went to hell to retrieve his mother's soul. And to make a very long story short, all the dead villains were released from hell. And during those battles, Bioman was killed. He wore a symbiote called the Inner Demon that was kind of visually similar to the Guyver. Um, which then, after Bioman was dead, the symbiote bonded to one of the Ant-Men, who are this race of insectoid alien navigators who helped the X-Men during the Brood adventure. And the Ant-Men have a caste system, and each caste has its own hive mind. So when the Ant-Man has the inner demon symbiote on him, he gets all the memories of everyone who ever wore the symbiote in the past. And a new cast is then formed to reflect this like new mind, right? And despite their name, which was given to them by humans who can't tell them apart, and the difference between the males and the females is it just goes over humans' heads. You know what I mean? So the point is that some of these aliens that humans call them all Ant-Men, some of them are actually female, right? So the one with the symbiote on now lays eggs. And then when those eggs hatch, they're part of this new caste, and they have that hive mind that has all of those memories from the previous men who wore the inner demon symbiote. Hopefully that makes sense. If that's confusing to anybody, say something in the comments section, and I'll try to do a better job of explaining all that. But the Gold Lantern felt devastated that his best friend, Bioman, had died during the big Hell invasion. So the female adult Ant-Man that is wearing the symbiote returns to space because all of the other the science cast want to examine the symbiote, which came from space, by the way. But so when she returns to that section of space where this race lives, she leaves a hatchling with Powerhouse, aka the Gold Lantern, so that he can still talk to his old friend, like in a way, right? Because, like I said, all those memories are in that hive mind. So that then brings us to the main plot. Gold Lantern is watching TV with some of the other X-Men, and specifically, they are watching the news. And while older generations have known for years about demons like Etrigan and angels like Zoriel of the Justice League, and all of the people who are kind of like over 40, to them, all of this heaven and hell stuff is old hat. You know what I mean? But some of the younger kids, the like college age kids and younger than that, stuff like that, some of them are their mind is blown by these recent revelations, pun intended. So on some level, then we established that there's kind of like some panic in the streets, you know what I mean? And the various X-Men are discussing what they should do, if anything. Gold Lantern, though, is quiet, and the baby insect alien next to him actually tries to light a cigarette, and Gold Lantern tells him not to. And the baby alien, reminds GL that even though he looks like a baby, he has the mind of an adult, right? Several adults, in fact. And he says he can do as he pleases. So Lantern tells him it just doesn't sit right with him to watch a baby smoke, right? And besides that, there's no smoking in the X Mansion. And honestly, the Gold Lantern's inability to even convince a baby to not smoke feels like a metaphor for his entire disastrous stay here. So just then, the newly revived Professor Charles Xavier walks in. He had been in heaven with other dead superheroes. And in the recent adventure with Doctor Doom, the gates of heaven flung open and old superheroes returned. And the ones who came back, they now look young and healthy, and whatever ailed them in life no longer bothers them now. So we mentioned that Daredevil can now see. Well, so the original Xavier is in the prime of his life and he can walk again, right? Stuff like that. Anyway, so he asks the Gold Lantern if he has a minute, and they step into Xavier's office for a talk. Gold Lantern apologizes about the cigarette thing with the alien baby, and Xavier waves the concept away with his hand. He seems kind and patient, but also concerned. He talks about the history of the school and how many times his own brother, the Juggernaut, had attacked the school and harmed students, and that to an extent, these things happen. However, since GL has been a teacher here, it seems like worse things keep happening with greater and greater frequency. So Lantern stops him and tells Professor X that he has already packed his things. So Xavier leans back in his chair, and the pause in their conversation is heavy. He feels the need to smooth things over, and he somewhat um, brings up that Lantern is alumni. He's always welcome here, stuff like that. Gold Lantern nods, and he shakes Xavier's hand, thanking him. And he had thought about quitting before, but had been on the fence, and there was kind of a push and a pull thing with that whole deal. But now he's committed to it. So he leaves the office and goes to the room where he and his wife have been living. And she sees the look on his face and hugs him. And she can tell exactly what's going on. So they go back to Ohio, which is his home state. And this is where his mother and her best friend, Lisa Jennings, live. Lisa was a teacher in Danville, Ohio, who became one of many women to go by the name Superwoman. So the same is true of Gold Lantern's mom. And she and Lisa were both abducted by Brainiac in the mid 1970s. And like a lot of alien abduction stories, it ends with both of them being pregnant. So Lantern's biological father is actually Superman because that was the DNA that Brainiac had stolen. Um, Even though, it's like his mom and his dad, they were never married or they were never romantic with each other, nothing like that. And then in the mid 1990s, Gold Lantern's entire family were slain by Blue Demon, who is a villain from GURP Supers. Normally, Blue Demon makes crop circles and mutilates cows and stuff like that, but sometimes he gets really nasty. And in this particular adventure, he wiped out Gold Lantern's entire family. So their farm was inherited, it was left to Gold Lantern, and to this day, it's still in his name. So other people had been renting the farm, but they moved out. So Lantern's mom lives here now. And she and Lisa are making needed repairs at super speed, using their powers as superwomen. Because, like I said, they both went by the name Superwoman at one point or another. So they're putting on fresh paint and stuff like that. By the way, it's also worth noting that only superheroes and supervillains came back. The rest of Lantern's family are still dead, right? And new characters who die can still die, right? Like Bioman, he died and he stayed dead. This was something that my players were confused about, so I thought I should say something here in the podcast in case anybody else was confused by this too, right? The coming back from the dead was like a one-time only thing, and honestly, it was kind of only um the past superheroes. Nobody else. So like for instance, Jimmy Olsen is not an actual superhero, right? So he would just stay dead, that kind of thing. Anyway, so here on the farm, uh a a road sort of goes right through the center of the farm. So on the um the east side of the road um is one house that's like a newer house, and then on the west side of the road is the original farmhouse that's like over 100 years old, and it's like cold in the winter. Not that that kind of thing would bother characters with these powers, right? Like Superwoman wouldn't phase her at all. She'd be immune to temperature. And then the other house, the newer one, is a split level house. It kind of looks like something out of Stranger Things, like it was built in the 80s. It's warmer in the winter. So when Gold Lantern shows up with this alien baby, his mom suggests that he live in the split level house so that that baby stays warm, right? And she says she'll take the farmhouse, which is the house she was born in. Um, And then also, of course, she gives him a hug that his teaching job, didn't work out. And so she offers to take him and his wife to a restaurant called Friendly's for ice cream. But he tells her that there is no Friendly's anymore. It went out of business while she was dead, right? And then that makes her sad. Speaking of which, a lot of things have changed. So she's having trouble acclimating to this new world because, after all, she has literally been dead for 30 years, right? A lot has transpired, which brings us to the next idea. Superman shows up. And by Superman, I mean the original Superman from the Golden Age. And he was still Superman in the Silver Age, and, all the way up to the Crisis, when he lost his powers. He was our Superman. And this was interesting to me because, to the best of my knowledge, this is actually the first time in game when we have ever seen both of Lantern's parents in the same place at the same time. This was also the first time his wife ever met his mom, right? So it's kind of a big adventure in that sense. So, Chris Kent asks his dad how he knew he was here. And Superman says he can hear his heartbeat. And Superman says, like Chris sounded down. So, Gold Lantern's mom tells his dad about the teaching job. And truth be told, Superman's hearing is so potent, he already basically knew everything, right? As he was flying here, he heard, like the conversation about the ice cream place going out of business, and the part about, Chris's mom having trouble adapting to the modern world. Um, and for that matter, even hearing what had changed. Clark comments that Alan Scott, the Golden Age Green Lantern, died in 1947. And he mentions that in a recent conversation with Alan didn't know who Martin Luther King was, right? And so this particular piece of information kind of like shocks everybody, right? And it illustrates the severity of the current situation. Anyways, so Superman tells his son, right, Chris, the Gold Lantern, that the Justice League could use a teacher, someone familiar with history and sociology. Gold Lantern sees everyone kind of looking at him expectantly, so he nods and he agrees that it sounds like that would probably be a pretty good fit. And that actually is going to bring us to our epilogue. So that following Monday morning, Gold Lantern and his wife, the Earthborn Angel of Fire, who was the Supergirl of the 90s, they walk into the field behind the house. And just like we saw on Justice League Unlimited, both of them are beamed up to the watchtower. And gathered here are all the superheroes who've ever died, right? And some of them are like from World War II, like the Blackhawks. Some of them are from the Old West, like Jonah Hex. So the Gold Lantern uses his power rings force manipulation power to create a golden podium. And he walks over to it, and then behind him, a golden chalkboard forms. And he starts to write on the chalkboard, and whatever he writes glows, brighter and stuff like that. And so he starts at the beginning, just teaching like American history, basically, right? And he's doing it in such a way that everybody can understand. So, including the superheroes from the Old West, you know, he's going to have to teach them everything from Prohibition to Martin Luther King to what does LGBT stand for. You know what I mean? I mean, like all of American history, right? Um, so he's got a job again, you know. Um, and that seems to me like a pretty good stopping point. Speaking of stopping, by the way, for now, this is the end of the New Mutants stuff that we were running. I started running this several months ago when we'd picked up a new player named Brad. I had him roll up a character in the Marvel superheroes system, and he basically had every kind of energy power there was. And looking back, I feel like I probably should have reined that in a little bit more, but I didn't, you know, so that is totally on me. He had never played a superhero game before, so certainly there was nothing he had done wrong on his end, you know. Um, and then the next thing that to me seems like a noteworthy reason for why this campaign was like it was is my son rolled up a character, you know, and he had the Nemesis idea from Marvel superheroes. That's the TSR version of Marvel, right? Phase rip system. So the idea they have with Nemesis is that like if you're fighting a villain with fire powers, you might suddenly develop water powers to try to put out those flames. You know what I mean? But if the character were totally alone, they wouldn't seem to have any abilities at all, right? That whatever the character does, it's always like a reaction to whatever powers are in his vicinity. And it just never really clicked with my son. He kind of complained about his character the entire time. If they had to do detective work or something where there was nobody around for him to have the opposite of their powers, you know what I mean? He didn't like that. He didn't seem to like that the powers were like ill-defined because, for instance, with say a fire villain, I was trying to give him wiggle room where you could, you know, you could have water put it out. Maybe you have ice powers. Maybe you create a vacuum because the fire needs air, right? Whatever the case may be, though, I was trying to give him room to be creative, and I don't think he liked it. I think he wanted like structure and stuff like that. And he wanted it to be like this is what I do, you know. And I think that the rest of us all actually really liked his character and thought the powers were cool. But he hated his character. And then not too long ago, he told me he had no more interest in playing in the New Mutants campaign anymore. And looking back, I do feel like the New Mutants adventures I'd ran had kind of this like cloud hanging over them. They weren't really my usual flavor of like four color fun, if you know what that means. Um, so I hadn't been loving those adventures either. I felt more like it was something that I had started, so I should probably follow through with it. But if the GM is not having fun, sooner or later the players are going to stop having fun too. And I think that was the slow death of this uh, team. Now, that said, Brad's character was sort of like a self insert in a way. So just yesterday, we made a different self insert for him, this time using GURP Supers, which has less of a focus on powers and more of a focus on advantages and skills than DC Heroes does. So as of right now, I am hopeful that this new spiritual successor to Axel will actually work better than Axel himself did, right? Time will tell, of course. And my son's friend Colin might be joining us. He's actually supposed to be coming over later today, so we might be making a character sheet for him in GURP Supers as well. And I spoke to my son about that. He wants his own self insert to go adventuring with Colin since the two of them are best friends in real life. But my son has been playing in my games his whole life, and as such, his character is very high level and he's super powerful. So my suggestion was we tell a cloning story and make a clone of his high level character, but have the clone be like starting level. You know what I mean? And then the clone can go on adventures with Colin, and that way they'd be like on even keel. You know what I mean? They would be equally powerful then. But again, we'll see what happens. Right now, we're still in the planning stages. And if my wife wants to keep playing Bubble Girl, right, she can always bring her over to GURPS from the defunct New Mutants campaign. And Bubble Girl was actually originally made in GURPS Supers anyways, so that'd be a really good fit. Um, but yeah, I guess that's it for me today. As always, we hope that you enjoyed hearing about what we're up to in our game. If you liked it and you want to support our modest little channel, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and leave us a comment. And from all of us here, the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.